And now, without further ado, I really want to thank our speakers tonight for giving up their evening, for coming along. I want to thank everybody in attendance. This is a great crowd, a great attendance, and it's going to be a great evening. Speaking for Donald Trump and the Republicans is Ken Abramowitz. Ken is a general partner and co-founder of NGN Capital, a $450 million world healthcare venture capital fund. He joined NGN from the Carlyle Group, where he was managing partner from 2001 to 2003, focused on U.S. healthcare buyouts. Prior to joining Carlyle, Mr. Abramowitz was an analyst at Stanford C. Bernstein, where he covered the medical supply, hospital management, and HMO industries for over 20 years. He was voted the #1 analyst in medical services and medical devices and services 15 years by Institutional Investor magazine, which also added him to the Wall Street Analyst Hall of Fame in 2009. He has published several notable studies on healthcare services, major medical mergers, and cardiovascular devices. He earned a BA in chemistry from Columbia University in 1972 and an MBA from Harvard in 1976. More recently, in 2013, Mr. Abramowitz created a new movement based on a speech entitled "How to Save Western Civilization from Itself." The speech was developed to try to fill the gaps in analysis between the politicians, academic community, business leaders, and news organizations. Mr. Abramowitz serves on the board of the Friends of Likud, Americans for Safe Israel, Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, and the Bible Lands Museum. He is also active in 25 pro-Israel America Western Civilization organizations. Without further ado, let us welcome Mr. Ken Abramowitz. After 12 minutes, I'll thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Rabbi, for having me and for having us and having you here tonight for this friendly discussion. I want to start off with just 1 minute of philosophy, and then we're going to discuss national security, update of Israel and America, and then I'll discuss some politics. I created a website about 2-3 years ago called SaveTheWest.com. And the website is dedicated to saving Western civilization from itself, because the #1 enemy of Western civilization is Western civilization, in the sense that oftentimes we don't protect ourselves. And I monitor 3 issues, whether I'm talking or listening or reading, anyone saying anything about anything. I grade writers and speakers on #1, their ability to grow an economy, or their policies. Can their policies grow an economy? #2, can their policies protect our culture in Constitution, Bill of Rights? And #3, can they protect us physically? These are the 3 basic building blocks behind any society. No society can be successful if they don't do all of those 3 things. And I have a theory that politicians should get an A and an A and an A on those 3 issues, because there's no excuse for anything less than an A and an A and an A. So that's just 1 minute of philosophy. You should all look at my website, public service website, SaveTheWest.com. Okay, now I want to spend a few minutes before we get into politics. I'm going to give you a quick national security update of Israel and America, and then I'm going to do it again from a political point of view. But first, I'm just going to start as an American citizen, observing Israel, observing America. So does everybody have their little 1-page summary? And look at the Israel map. I have extra copies if someone doesn't have it. But everyone should have an Israel map in front of you. Everyone ready? Okay. Israel is fighting a 10-front war for its existence. #1, has to protect itself from Iranian nukes. #2, Palestinian Authority, nonstop low-intensity terrorism. #3, cyber. #4, ISIS threatening Jordan. #5, ISIS threatening Egypt. #6, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, already took over Gaza. #7, the Bedouins are stealing all the land they can steal, financed by the EU and the Muslim Brotherhood. #8, Israel has to protect its offshore gas fields. #9, the UN, EU, International Court of Justice, and a whole variety of NGOs I call intellectual terror organizations, because they have a false narrative. And #10, Iran in the north through their Hezbollah division, or friends, however you want to look at it. So this is a mess, but Israel knows it's a mess. Israel's been fighting for its existence since 1948. In fact, Jews have been fighting for our collective existence for 3,800 years since Abraham Avinu, decided that paganism should be replaced by Judaism, which was a brilliant thought when 99.9% of the people were pagans and they all carried knives. It's quite a brave, bold thought that Abraham had. Now let's go to the U.S. I'll give you a similar quick update of national security. So just flip over the Israel map and let's go to the U.S. Everyone have a copy, right? Okay. America is fighting a 10-front war for its existence, but in contrast to Israel, America doesn't know it. Israel knows it's fighting for its existence. America has no clue that it's fighting for its existence. We have to protect ourselves from Iranian nukes, number one. Number two, the UN's an enemy of America. It's also an enemy of Israel. It's an enemy of Western civilization. It's been taken over by the terror organizations and dictatorships. Number three, NATO's underfunded and can't defend Europe from either Russia or political Islam. Number four, President Obama, I hate to say this, sometimes with Republican help, has been importing European socialism. European socialism is not affordable in Europe. It's not affordable here. Number five, Iran is invading Latin America as we speak. I just heard a Latin American expert speak a few months ago, and he estimates that Iran has 40 to 50,000 agents, terrorists, narco-terrorists operating out of Latin America right now, running the largest narco-terror operation in the history of the world. Number nine, the Muslim Brotherhood's in jail in Egypt. We allow them to exist in America. Number seven, 80% of mosques financed by the Wahhabis out of Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, or the Muslim Brotherhood. Number eight, Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS just walking across the Rio Grande, the border's half open. Number nine, North Korea developing nukes in conjunction with Iran. The North Korean program is really the Iranian program. They're operating and no one's stopping them. And number 10, cyber agents from China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran attacking us every second of every day. This is a mess. We don't know it's a mess. We're fighting on 10 fronts. We're losing on every front. So whoever becomes the next president is going to be handed this map and this mess. Okay. Now, let me just spend the last 7 or so minutes. And now, let's look at it now from the political point of view. Nothing I've said was political. It was just philosophical or national security based. So let's look at it from the political point of view. Okay, let's go back to the Israel map. Okay, number one, Iran's working on nukes and ICBMs as a result of the Iran deal, which they never signed, by the way. They have the right to develop nuclear weapons and ICBMs in year 10 to 15. There's different provisions that come off at different times. Iran's the number one terror organization in the world today, and the Democratic Party basically gave Iran the right to have nukes, and Iran's promised to kill everyone in Israel. They've also promised to kill everyone in America. Death to Israel, death to America. You can't hand the number one terror organization in the world nukes and finance them at the same time. Number two, the Palestinian Authority is running a nonstop low-intensity terrorism effort against Israel. And the Democrats want a Palestinian state. A Palestinian state, by definition, is a terrorist state. It will threaten Israel, but it also threaten the Muslims in the Palestinian state. Because remember, the number one victim of political Islam are Muslims. So a Palestinian state would last for 5 minutes and then be taken over by Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, or the Wahhabis. And you'll basically have the mess that's going on in Syria and Iraq right now move down to Judea and Samaria. That's not in the interest of Israel. It's not in the interest of Jews or Christians or Muslims to have a Palestinian state. Why is she pushing a Palestinian state? Number three, cyber is not a political issue. It's just an issue we have to contend with overall. Number four, ISIS was created out of the vacuum when President Obama and Hillary prematurely withdrew from Iraq, created this vacuum. ISIS filled the void. And so they indirectly fueled the creation and growth of ISIS, which is threatening Jordan, threatening Egypt, two American allies, and of course, threatening Israel. Number 6, the Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, took over Gaza, and during the last Gaza war, the Obama administration was pressuring Israel to accept the ceasefire on the basis of Hamas or Muslim Brotherhood terms. Makes no sense. Israel went to Egypt and worked out a deal with Egypt. Number 9, the UN is obsolete. Its time has come and gone. It should be replaced by the United Nations of Democracies. Why do we have dictatorships in the UN? In Iran, who's promised genocide against everyone in America, violating the basic precept of the United Nations as a member of the United Nations. Why is that so? And then at the north, you have Hezbollah, Iran, beefing up its weapons with money financed by the US. Because the US government, thanks to the Iran agreement, which they never signed, is now the #1 financier of terror in the world today. I hate to say that, it's sad. Okay, let's go to the next page. Let's look at the US map. Number 1, within 10, 15 years, Iran will have the ability to blow up America. Military people tell me all they need is 2 nukes to blow up the electric grid, and that's what they're focused on working on. 2 nukes high over Chicago, shoots off enough electromagnetic pulse to destroy the electric grid. We could have 100 million dead Americans in 15 years, financed by the Democrats, who authorized this Iran deal, which provides material support for terrorism and is unethical and immoral, and anyone who supported the Iran deal is automatically disqualified from any office in this country forever. Automatic disqualification. I'll skip over to number 3, NATO. America had, or was proposed to put missile defense systems in Czechoslovakia and Poland. Not to defend Czechoslovakia and Poland, but to protect America from Iranian nukes financed by America that they're going to have in 10 or 15 years. They were supposed to be there to intercept Iranian nukes. Hillary and Obama took the missile defense down. And now we're not protected from Iranian nukes. Why would you want to do something like that? Let's go to number 5. Hillary, 2 minutes. Hillary and Obama believe in open borders. Well, yeah, we have open borders. We're being invaded right now by the 4 terror organizations. 4 political Islam terror organizations have declared war on America and are invading the country right now as we speak, and our government's doing almost nothing to stop them. We have Iran and its agents, Al-Qaeda, ISIS and its agents, the Muslim Brotherhood and its agents, and the Wahhabis and their agents. And we're being invaded right now as we speak, and our government's not protecting us. Number 9, Iran's developing nukes through North Korea, and we're doing nothing to shut down the North Korea nuclear program, which is an existential risk to America. So let me just conclude in 1 minute. Let's go back to the first thing I said. Let's grade the politicians on the 3 issues. Can the ideas and philosophy of Mr. Trump or Secretary Clinton grow the economy? Number 1, protect our culture. Number 2, and protect us physically. If I were a professor grading, I would give Hillary an F, an F, and an F, and I'd give Mr. Trump a B, and a B, with a potential for an A and an A and an A. But right now, I'll say a B candidate against an F candidate. I'll take the B candidate on his way to A. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. There are just a few seats left here at the front on both sides. Please don't save seats, and people can be ushered into the front of them. Now we're going to hear, thank you very much indeed to Ken Abramowitz. Now we're going to hear from Ruth Messinger, speaking on behalf of the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. Ruth Messinger is the president of the American Jewish World Service, has been from 1998 to July of 2016, and is currently the organization's inaugural global ambassador. Ruth's 18-year presidency of AJWS began after a 20-year career in public service in New York City as a council member and Manhattan Borough president. She currently sits on the State Department's Religion and Foreign Policy Working Group, co-chairs the Sub-Working Group on Social Justice, and is a member of the World Bank's Moral Imperative Working Group on Extreme Poverty. Ruth has been honored for her leadership with awards from many national Jewish organizations and honorary degrees from 5 major American rabbinical seminaries. Ruth is an active member of her congregation, Society for the Advancement of Judaism. She holds a BA from Radcliffe College and an MSW from the University of Oklahoma. She's married to Andrew Lachman and has 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. And without wanting to sound biased, I think as a rabbi I can say, Kanai Nahara, Kan Yirmu. And without further ado, just to keep everything fair, you have 13 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi. I also want to thank Lincoln Square for doing this and doing this in its quadriennial tradition. And I want to thank you, Rabbi, for your clear opening framing of the debate. I think we could have used you on all of those television debates. I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to note, I know several of you in the audience, including my husband, but I want to note the presence of Ken Bialkin, who has been for a long time a distinguished leader in the American Jewish community and the American Jewish history. Good to see you. And I want to thank Ken for that presentation. My presentation is quite different and might be thought to be the more standard presentation. That is, I'm going to talk to you about Hillary Rodham Clinton and why I support her. I'm going to use my, whatever it is, 12 and a half minutes to talk about Hillary with only one introductory comment, and that is to really echo what Rabbi Robinson said before, and that is that for many reasons, this is the strangest election of my reasonably long lifetime, including the lack of time and attention that has been given to candidate policies and proposals. So let me start from a personal point of view. I am privileged to know Hillary the person. I met her early in the 1992 campaign. I worked with her informally on programs for women and children. I worked with her when she was our New York senator, and I was in New York City government, and we collaborated particularly on efforts to close the wage gap. And I have been privileged to work with her in her role as Secretary of State, where on behalf of American Jewish World Service, we were able to engage her in such powerful global issues as the oppression of women and girls in many societies, the devastation of Haiti after the 2010 earthquake, the need for the United States to speak loudly for the human rights of all persons in every country, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, gender, or disability. The Hillary that I know has been working on the same issues much of her lifetime. First, as a young lawyer who chose to work with the Children's Defense Fund on its issues to make this country do better for its least well-off families. Then as the First Lady of Arkansas. Now some of you may know this, but Hillary brought the world's best program for early intervention with poor pregnant women, a program that would see those women through their pregnancies to a safe delivery and then help them stimulate the physical, intellectual, and social development of their children. That program is a program that Hillary brought to the United States from Israel. It's called the HIPPY program. And because of her introducing it in America, it has grown here substantially in the States and also in Central America. I know that Hillary as a spokesperson for the status of women in our society and globally during her time in the White House as First Lady and her service as the senator from New York. Let me remind you that as our senator, she was a strong and effective voice after 9/11, spoke up for the health needs of the first responders, worked to develop the upstate economy in New York, and demonstrated particular, and now much to be wished for, skill at being able to work across the aisle and build bipartisan support on many of these issues. And as a diplomat, I have seen Hillary in her tenure as Secretary of State representing the president, but not always agreeing with him, coping with severe global crises in the Mideast and in parts of Africa and Central America, where my organization worked on the ground and where we always had her ear and could get her to focus on supporting groups fighting for their rights as women, as smallholder farmers, and most dramatically as victims of the ongoing genocide in Darfur. So one reason that I'm enthusiastic about supporting Hillary for president, because I know what she'll do, because I know what she's already done. From helping women and girls, to supporting Israel, to trying to build a more equitable country, to seeking a world that deals better with its conflicts, I believe that she has the values, the knowledge, the experience, and the temperament to make a great president. Let me go through some specifics. Hillary is committed to an economy that works for everyone, creating new jobs, lowering the cost of a higher education, investing in our infrastructure, strengthening American manufacturing and American small business, making the tax code more equitable by imposing higher taxes on the wealthiest people in the society, closing the gender pay gap, expanding Social Security, and making continuing and indeed necessary adjustments to the Affordable Care Act without throwing it out. Hillary takes the threat of climate change seriously and will pursue efforts to make the United States a clean energy superpower that maximizes the use of solar energy. Hillary understands the complex of challenges of being the United States Commander-in-Chief. She has an unwavering commitment over several decades to Israel's security and to the importance of strengthening and deepening U.S.-Israel relationships. She sees the importance of our relationships with our allies and with the use of those relationships to defeat ISIS, to hold Iran accountable to the items that it signed for, and indeed to challenge their support for terrorism, an issue to which Ken spoke. Hillary has promised to fight for comprehensive immigration reform that will provide a full and equal path to citizenship for persons living in this country, that will continue our strong vetting of those seeking asylum here, and will work with our allies to staunch the flow of refugees to the West. Hillary has pledged to promote quality, affordable child care in the United States, to deal with sexism in the workplace, to secure paid family leave, and to do more about the continuing and pervasive issues of gender-based violence. So let me say for sure that I am certain that there is no one in this room, even those who might be strong supporters of Hillary Clinton, who agrees with everything that she has done or who endorses everything that she says she will do. For me, and you all know that I was in politics for 20 years, I had the privilege of representing some of you at least for that entire time. You probably did not agree with everything I did. And to quote Barney Frank, I didn't always agree with everything I did. But the reason that there are disagreements is because Hillary has a 30-year record or more of working in the public sector. It's part of why I'm convinced that as we do agree with her and we don't, as we bring pressure on her to do more things that are important to each or any one of us, she will bring to the Oval Office the wisdom, the tact, the relational skills, and the values that will serve us well in these troubled times. I didn't speak to the issues that Ken spoke to at great length. We can debate some of those, but I do want to say that as thoughtful as his presentation was from his perspective, I was quite surprised at the grades. I won't discuss the grades that he gave Hillary because I just think they're wrong, but I was astounded at the grades that he gave Trump on several of those issues, because I have seen over a more than year-long campaign the severe risks to national security that, in my judgment, is posed by someone who thinks so highly of himself that he feels comfortable changing his position on issues from day to day, has often and regularly been exposed as lying to the public, and perhaps most dramatically from the perspective that Ken was speaking about, who feels comfortable, Donald Trump, attacking all of our allies and denigrating our military. In my judgment, that's not how you build a strong response on any foreign policy issue. And I am further concerned, again, speaking only to the issues where you provided a grade, about Donald Trump's perverse commitment to dividing and attacking this country, attacking Mexicans, Muslims, immigrants, women, and persons with disabilities. And then most recently, in the last few weeks, attacking our system of government, talking constantly of rigged elections, and his off and on stated refusal to accept the results of the election if he loses. For me, that is definitely not someone who gets a good grade on upholding our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. So I have spoken at great length to Hillary's positions. Obviously, there's a great deal more for you to learn in the questions you ask, and I would also refer you to the Clinton website, which goes issue by issue on those issues that may be most important to you. Let me just close, Rabbi, by saying that the one thing that I think is clear is that this is an election, even more than most, in which every American ought to feel compelled to be sure that he or she submits a vote and speaks to others whom you may know who may not be so inclined to vote. I speak particularly in this instance to this audience, to those of our children and grandchildren for whom this is the first election, and who have to be frankly confounded about what it is that America stands for and how it is that America runs elections. I very much hope that they will be helped to the extent that they need help, or that they will manage the website to the extent that they're better at that than we are, to learn the issues and make a choice among the candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. So as I said at the beginning, we're going to allow up to 5 minutes for you each to respond, even though you were sort of, as you pointed out, Ruth gave very kind of different presentations. Then we're going to throw it open to questions. There are stewards here from the Shul Office as the President who have cards, no pens. We're not trying to disenfranchise anybody. We just if you would like, in the meantime, cards to write down questions. For those of you who came in late, a reminder, we're not taking contributions from the floor and certainly not heckling. All the questions will be written questions. Okay, Ken.
Thank you again, Rabbi. Thank you, Ruth, for well defending Hillary. And so let me add a few extra comments here. First, the comments that I made in general were my comments discussing either world affairs or politics. Now I want to add something directly from the Trump campaign. And I chatted with them about some talking points. I just want you to have direct talking points from the Trump campaign. Number one, relative to Iran, Iran's an existential threat to Israel, and any friend of Israel would not have signed the Iran deal. By the way, now me speaking by myself, I would say any friend of America wouldn't have signed the Iran deal, which Iran never signed, because the deal is an existential risk actually to world peace. Second point they wanted to mention is that when Mr. Trump becomes president, he's going to ask the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department to investigate intimidation of Jews on campus, which is an outrage, the amount of anti-Semitism. By the way, in America, everybody has the right to be anything, anybody, whatever they want to be, except Jews. Okay, pure anti-Semitism allowed to run rampant on the campuses, and the government hasn't done anything about it. The feds have done nothing, the states have done nothing, the mayors have done nothing. It's an insult to the American culture that it refuses to come to grips with anti-Semitism, which can be ended in 5 seconds. All the government has to do is announce any universities, high schools, anyone engaging in anti-Semitism get no federal financing starting in 5 minutes. That'll be the end of anti-Semitism. The Trump campaign also does not believe in ethnic cleansing of Judea and Samaria. I would go a step further, but this is me speaking. There also can never be a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria. Jews have more rights in Judea and Samaria than Americans have to America. Jews have been in Judea and Samaria for 3,800 years. Americans have been in America for 400 years. How can a 400-year-old country tell a 38-year-old country where it's supposed to live? It's just insulting anti-Semitism. Number 4, the Trump campaign believes that the Palestinian Authority must stop its incitement against Jews, against Israelis, and stop paying terrorists sitting in jail who have harmed Israelis. Relative to the UN, the Trump campaign believes there should be no financing for the Human Rights Commission. I would go a step further, but this is just me talking. I would have no funding for the United Nations. It's time to close it. Relative to Jerusalem, the Trump campaign insists that it'll move the embassy to Jerusalem immediately, even overruling State Department objections. And finally, a final Trump point relative to school choice. The Trump campaign has identified $20 billion of federal financing that can be redirected to providing vouchers and providing tax credits and deductions so that people can send their children or get a subsidy to send their children to the school of their choice. So I think I have one last minute. So let me just mention something about Iran and monitoring the Iran agreement. The Iran agreement cannot be monitored. The reason is the UN is responsible for monitoring the declared sites. But the military sites of Iran are not subject to UN or anybody's inspection. So in other words, they have a parallel nuclear program going on, and the UN is only authorized to look at the non-military sites. The military sites have been left off of the agreement. Hello? Who would sign an agreement like that? Who would engage in agreement? Someone who's pro-Israel, pro-America? No way. This is the most flawed agreement. It is the #1 mistake ever made by a country in the history of countries and the history of the world. Thank you for your time.
Perfect timing. Ruth, 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I've already responded on several points. I want to say, I know you're a smart audience, so you can keep it clear, but I'm not quite sure whether I'm here listening to a debate between the supporters of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton or the supporters of Ken Abramowitz. So I'm sorry for your supporters that you're not running for president, but it does somewhat challenge the audience to hear both what the Trump campaign says and what you actually say. That said, I assume the audience can separate those out. I really want to just go back and put on the table contrast some of your statements, which I take both at face value from the campaign and from you, with some of the things that I've heard Donald Trump say. I've heard Donald Trump name 2 or 3 countries that he thought would be just great if they had nuclear weapons. Doesn't matter to me which those countries are. We have been living with the threat of nuclear disaster for much of our lifetimes. The notion that a president of the United States, a candidate for president of the United States, should speak to more and more countries getting nuclear weapons strikes me as terrifying. The issue that I mentioned in my closing, whatever the positions on Iran, on issues before the United Nations, the one thing that the United States needs, which sometimes our presidents and our secretaries of state have developed well and sometimes not so well, is allies in the world. And Donald Trump has attacked all of NATO, said we can do this all on our own. We don't need any one of these bodies. I find that certainly not Hillary's point of view, not my point of view, but also an odd position for this time in the history of the world. And the last thing I want to say, and here I speak with some significant information, is that as deplorable, as certainly as deplorable, for there to be anti-Semitism on campuses, and I have grandchildren right now on some of those campuses, the notion that Jews are the only population that is attacked is simply false. It's false on every campus. It's false in our society. And we have a candidate for president whom you are supporting who has encouraged the American public to think badly of Mexicans, to deport all Muslims, who I heard again on television tonight saying, well, if not all 1.6 billion Muslims in the world were terrorists, most of them were. That's a very divisive approach to the society that we've built in this city and in this country, in addition to the fact that deporting millions and millions of Muslims is simply an impossibly impractical proposal, but also hugely, from my point of view and Hillary's point of view, entirely anti-American and against the notion of what we stand and what we're trying to build here.
Okay, thank you both very, very much indeed. And thank you for the very, very respectful way this is being conducted. A number of questions have come in, are continuing to come in. Actually feeling a little bit overwhelmed by these questions. So I'm going to try and triage them a little bit. And first of all, here's a question that is really for, sorry, have I taken your notes? And that's a question. The following is a question to both of you. And we'll start with this. It's a 3-part question and really helps move on our discussion into some issues that perhaps we haven't spoken about yet. So to both speakers, Obamacare is very broken, but promises necessary, provides necessary health care. Specifically states how your candidate proposes to fix it. Number two, how will they deal? It says, how will you deal? But I imagine we're going to say, how will they deal with such a stubborn and defective Congress? And lastly, how do you propose to realistically deal with illegal immigrants vis-a-vis families already in the country? We'll start this time with Ruth and then with Ken.
On the health care issue, of course, everybody in this room knows that Hillary has a long and often painful history with trying to develop a health care system that would work. The Affordable Care Act, for all its faults and flaws, has provided growing numbers of Americans who never had access to health care with health care. That may be less of an issue, maybe, I'm not sure, for most people in this room, but it has made a dramatic difference in the lives of millions of people and their families, some of whom we hear on television and heard at the conventions. Hillary's commitment specifically is to work, and this relates a little bit, Rabbi, to the second question, but we'll get there in a minute, is to work with the governors of every state to expand Medicaid, to launch a national campaign to enroll people who are eligible but not already enrolled. She will oppose, and these clearly exist already, unjustified health premium increases, and will try to give in every state, every American, the option for a public option insurance plan, which then becomes a challenge to the private insurers that help to keep their costs down. And in addition to that, she's engaged in a set of specific proposals about some of the major health threats in this country right now, from, not making fun of the alphabet, but from autism to Zika. On the second issue, I think we actually have the evidence. Hillary is one of the relatively few, not by any means the only, but one of the very few people in politics and public life in this country in the last decade who has a track record of working across the aisle in Congress, who was able to engage several different Republican senators and Republican members of Congress to work on bipartisan issues, and some of those, as a consequence, passed. She's going to take into the White House, should she be elected, the capacity and the determination to work with people from both parties to deal very aggressively with what has been a severe challenge, whatever you think of the political positions, a severe challenge to the United States in the last 6 years, and that is a Congress whose major focus, by their own admission, has been to stop anything from happening. That's a very dangerous situation for this country. It requires high levels of relational and diplomatic skill. I think that the evidence suggests that Hillary has those, and I have to say that I've not seen those skills from Donald Trump. And on the third issue of immigration, we have the very specific question that was asked has to do with existing people who are in this country who don't have full citizenship or families that are split. And Hillary has made a commitment to introduce, again, assuming positive work with the Congress, to introduce pieces of legislation that will address that issue and that will create a fair and equitable path to citizenship, first for people who are immigrants in this country who don't right now have any path to citizenship, so that more families will not be broken apart.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me discuss these three issues. On Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, I actually call it the Unaffordable Care Act, because the country can't afford it. Mr. Trump has talked about repealing and replacing it, and in terms of offering refundable tax credits and health savings accounts so that people can shop around for insurance from various insurance companies. He didn't say this, but the government would have to pre-negotiate with the insurance companies so that people wouldn't be negotiating one-on-one with a big insurance company. Basically, the government would negotiate on behalf of the individuals who don't have health insurance to use their refundable tax credits, better known as a voucher, and health savings accounts, which the government can also subsidize, so that people can shop around. Relative to Congress, if I were dealing with Congress, I would focus the Congress on the three issues that I mentioned in my first minute. Grow the economy, protect our culture, protect us physically. So if I were advising Mr. Trump, I would focus on those three issues, because those three issues are actually not controversial. How to grow the economy, how to protect the culture, how to protect us physically, that's controversial. But the framework, the structure, is actually not controversial. So I would pick a non-controversial structure like that and then try to get common ground between Republicans and Democrats on those three issues. Relative to immigration, there's legal immigration, there's illegal immigration. For illegal immigration, illegal immigrants have no rights. They broke the law. Legal immigrants have some rights. So I don't have much sympathy for illegal immigrants. But let me just mention a comment that you don't see in the newspaper about immigrants. And that is, we have rules in this country. It's called Constitution Bill of Rights. By the way, you go to a basketball game, they have basketball rules. They don't play soccer at basketball games, they play basketball. Every organization has rules. Our country has rules. We should accept immigrants who believe in the Constitution Bill of Rights. But if they don't believe in the Constitutional Bill of Rights, we don't want them here. There's no reason for them to be here. What are they doing here? And so, to me, there's a lot of focus in the newspaper about terrorists. Okay, physical terrorists, we don't want them there. We also don't want intellectual terrorists. When someone shows up in America and says, I hate your system, I hate the Constitution, I hate the Bill of Rights, and I'm going to replace it with Sharia law, my response is, no, you're not. And people who say that, should be deported, absolutely. By the way, if you show up at a basketball game and say, start kicking the ball, it's a soccer game, the police would come and say, hey buddy, you're in the wrong game, out of here, okay? So that's what I wanted to say on immigration.
I would just like to add one comment to that because I think, Ken, several times in answering the questions and talking about going to Congress, you talked eloquently about what you would do and what your top three issues are and how you would offer that framework to the Congress. I haven't seen a word from Donald Trump, and if I were you, I would not be comfortable saying that I know that Donald Trump will do this or that. Donald Trump has insulted everyone in the Congress on his team. Forget what he thinks about the Democrats. He's been insulting to Paul Ryan. He's been insulting to John McCain. He's going to have more trouble than most building a block with which he can work to create bipartisan legislation. And I want to make one other comment, and then I know you want to go to other questions. And that is, nobody is suggesting that someone who stands up here and in this country and announces allegiance to a foreign government or a foreign way of law is somebody for whom we should be creating a path to citizenship. Nobody is suggesting that. Nobody. And I think it's an easy appeal to an audience. We are an audience that lives, I think, virtually everybody here, and thank you for coming out, on the west side of Manhattan in a hugely diverse neighborhood in which our next door neighbors, our colleagues at work, our employees, are Christian, are Muslim, are Hindu, are law-abiding people, many of whom are legal immigrants, came here ages ago, like the judge whom Donald Trump said couldn't decide on a case related to Mexico, although he was born in the United States. Those are people who need and deserve a path to citizenship, and at least now I'm speaking for myself. First time I'm speaking for myself, as a Jew who knows when my ancestors came to this country and who came here legally and who came here and chose to stay and find a way to build a business and secure citizenship even though they weren't initially here legally. I would like to see my community be as generous as possible in building paths to immigration and citizenship for people who meet the American test.
Sure. But when my grandparents came from Lithuania 100 years ago, they didn't speak English, so I'll guess they didn't know that much about the Constitution Bill of Rights, but if you had asked them, they would say, whatever it says, I believe in it. I'm coming here to be an American. I'm not coming here, I'm Jewish, but I'm not coming here to convert everybody to Judaism. I'm just coming here to fit in and be an American.
And the 11 million Muslims who Donald Trump wants to export, they all don't say that?
So
I think you're wrong.
So it'll just be easier if we actually move on the
okay,
conversation, because
go right ahead.
Prioritizing, at least for the moment, questions, the many questions, and a number have come in that are actually addressed to both questions or contain elements for both candidates or for both speakers. So this is, and I'm going to allow each of you to answer the other side's question as well. But this question has, He did, and thank you. I don't need to be told how to run it, but I did let them both speak. Can you, number one, could you clarify why Hillary would be good for Israel vis-a-vis Trump? And to you, the question is, and really a question regarding Donald Trump's backing and association with anti-Semitic groups, KKK, David Duke, etc.
Relative to Trump's association with people called the alternative right, I have no idea what the alternative right is. I never met anyone, never heard of anyone. It's a bogus term invented by the Democrats to take pressure off of them. Let's state clear and simple, who are the Democrats? The Democrats aren't the Democrats. They're the Socialist Workers' Party pretending to be Democrats. They're far, far left, radical experimenters, and we're the guinea pigs. I don't want to be the guinea pigs of the leftists. Socialism, communism has failed for 200 years, killed over 100 million people. We don't need a stronger government. America is strongest when the individuals, with inspiration from above, do the great things that we do, sometimes with some help from the government. So, this election is a battle between the individual and the status. And the statists have failed in every country. And if you want to see failure, go to Europe. Europe can't grow their economy. Europe won't protect their culture. They don't even believe in their culture, and they can't protect themselves militarily. If Hillary's elected, we'll be failure like Europe. My grandparents came to America to succeed, not to fail. If they had wanted to fail, they could have stayed in Lithuania.
I don't want to spend a lot of time challenging Ken's view of party history in this country, which is, from my mind, totally untrue, but is also not something I've heard Donald Trump say. But I guess I would be curious, Ken, in your next response, if you could tell me whether, going back how far, Roosevelt, Truman, Kennedy, Clinton, Obama, all of them are socialist workers and not Democrats, not in the country in which I grew up, and I've lived through all of those administrations. In response to the question that you posed to me, Rabbi, I would say that it is Hillary's 30 years of relationships, and it is the astounding amount of support, which I think some in this audience will back me up on, that she's received from people as diverse as, I'm not going to remember them all, Martin Indyk, Dennis Ross, Menachem Genach, a variety of people, all denominations in the Jewish community, who say that a long time set of relational skills with people, starting with the prime minister and going down to Israelis who are active in science and technology, to the people in this country whose primary organizing issue is around the future security of Israel, that those are a set of relationships and endorsements that I take seriously. I would refer the audience to a very recent and long article, so I'm not going to try to keep quoting from it, in the Jerusalem Post by one of its authors, which lists about 25 people knowledgeable about American security and American military might, who talk about the ways in which Hillary will reestablish relationships that they feel that Obama fractured, but will continue to work to build for a strong and secure Israel.
Continuing on the theme of foreign policy, and then coming back to a number of questions. And many of the questions, as is only to be expected after a long campaign, reflect the same issues. So I'm holding really a bunch of questions really reflect the same question. I'm going to try and pose them in a way that that both candidates can, or both speakers can answer. So the next question is a number of questions here regarding foreign policy. Hillary Clinton served as Secretary of State for 4 years. Comparing international crisis in 2008 with conditions today, Ms. Clinton left conditions worse than when she entered office. Some of these countries include Syria, Yemen, Libya, Iran, Afghanistan, Russia, North Korea. And who can forget her incompetence in dealing with the Benghazi crisis? With such results, how can you support Ms. Clinton for president, commander-in-chief? I'll go so far as to read the next question just to show that I'm, taking the questions as they come. As a personal email server was used while our servicemen were in Benghazi and subsequently murdered by Hillary Clinton, words of this question, not mine, how can you, Ruth Messinger, promote her as chief of American forces? At the same time, I'm going to throw this question back to you, Ken, as well. Can you address the temperament of Donald Trump, specifically why you think he can be a world leader given his temperament? So questions really on foreign policy regarding experience, competency, and temperament. And We'll start with you, Ken, this time.
Mr. Trump has a wonderful temperament, believe me. Look, as a successful CEO of a big company, he has an issue of believing that everything he touches turns to gold. Okay, so that is I'd say, an issue. By the way, President Obama, hello, was he listening to advice of anybody? No. Okay, so we just went through 8 years of basically a petty dictator running the country. So I think, I don't think Mr. Trump became president of a successful company by being a dictator. If you do that in business, people just leave. I mean, even you pay them, they still leave. So I admit it's an issue, but I think that he can rise to the challenge because he has good people around him, and he's increasingly listening to them. So I think it's a challenge that he'll have, I will admit that, but I think he will rise to the occasion. Also, there is one advantage of being unpredictable. When you're fighting a war with 4 terror organizations, just to repeat, Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Muslim Brothers, and the Wahhabis, you want someone who's a little unpredictable. Because these organizations are basically bent on world domination. You want them to be afraid of the president. You want the president to be unpredictable. You want them to feel scared, so to speak, about overstepping their bounds.
Okay, I'm a little bewildered by some of these answers. A couple of the questions that you posed in that multi-part question, Rabbi, and I appreciate the ways you're trying to put it together, were the work of the last 8 years on foreign policy, which for sure have been challenging at every turn and in every regard in every country in the Middle East. I don't think that our country settles for less than it can get. And I think that it was painful, but we got the best that we could on several of these negotiations. Obviously, we disagree, but I would point to you to the comments from most of the people and much of the leadership in Israel supporting Hillary. Now, maybe that's because they love everything that she did. Maybe it's because they know, as this Jerusalem Post article suggests, that she will be about drastically shifting the tone and the tenor of the relationships with Israel away from what has been a more disputatious posture that was adopted by the Obama administration. That's what they're saying she will do. For all of this, always the future is a little bit where do you take your best guess and where do you put your things. But the number of people in this country and in Israel who have expressed huge anxiety about Donald Trump having his finger on the button, about Donald Trump with his temperament, seems to me to be just frankly, terrifying. I was most interested in your comment about not being sure about his temperament. I appreciate your saying that. I've known Donald Trump for a long time. People in this neighborhood will remember that I negotiated with Donald Trump on Riverside South. So I know a great deal of what his life and his style is like. And I feel quite comfortable saying that Donald Trump is a very high example of somebody who doesn't listen to the people around him. You said he's listening to them more and more. And every single day for the last 2 weeks, he and Kellyanne Conway have had publicly statements of significant disagreement with each other. On several of those days, he has had public disagreements with his vice president. For me, that's not a style of leadership that is one that I respect, and it's not a style of leadership that looks well to the rest of the world. Because of my job, I travel a great deal in many countries, mostly not in the West, in Central America and Africa and Asia. And I will tell you, for the last year, long before Donald Trump became candidate, people were expressing their anxiety about some of the things that they were hearing Trump saying and doing, most particularly his attitude of disregard and dismay against the NATO allies. So I don't think he has the temperament to be leader. I said that in my opening statement, but I surely don't think there's much evidence that he listens to people around him. I would point out to you that a Republican Congress had 7 committees investigating every aspect of Benghazi, holding Hillary there for as long as 6 or 7 hours of full questioning, and in each instance decided that although everybody, including the Secretary of State, shared incredible regret for what happened, there was nothing and no way in which to pursue a case against her for what happened. A Republican Congress that's been hell-bent on destroying both the president and his appointees couldn't find a basis on which to pursue that.
So the next couple of questions, actually, and this again represents a number, and it's hard to do this in a kind of a bipartisan way because the majority of questions are really around this kind of topics. So we'll take one question, which again, of course, we'll both respond to, but are more it's challenging Hillary on Israel-related issues. And then we'll switch back to two questions that are truly balanced. So a couple of questions. You, Ruth, quoted that Hillary is a friend of Israel, but has said she's open to dividing Jerusalem. And at the funeral of Shimon Peres, the State Department listed it as first taking place in Jerusalem and then crossed out the word Israel. Similarly, how do you reconcile Hillary's support of Israel with her relationship with George Soros, Sidney Blumenthal, Michael Blumenthal, etc.? And just to sort of balance out a little bit, again, a number of questions, which I just feel that we should maybe just, one last question here, just to put it a little bit more to the side. Again, questions the support that Donald Trump gets from neo-Nazi and fascist organizations. So this is sort of balance out those questions. Guilt by association, we could call it, and Jerusalem, and who is a true friend of Israel amongst the candidates.
Okay, so look, I hear from the noise in the audience that there are people who disagree. I suspect there are also people who agree. All I can do, because I really, as you all know, I think all of you know, I was in public life for 20 years. I've had surrogate speakers, but I believe that when there's a campaign, the candidate or her or his surrogates should speak to the issues on which they know that candidate's position. So I will reiterate both what I said about Hillary's position, which is an unwavering commitment to Israel's security and the importance of America's bond with Israel, a determination to redouble United States leadership in order to confront regional threats, many of which Ken spoke to in his opening remarks, including the dangers posed by Iran and its terrorist proxies. Clinton will oppose anti-Israel bias in UN bodies and other international forums and stand up against the BDS movement. And then I refer you again to this article in which I'm going to be very specific because it seems as if some people would like to hear that. Martin Indyk says, reestablishing trust with Israel is going to be relatively straightforward for her. I think, this is Martin Indyk speaking, President Obama got off on the wrong foot, and I think that Secretary Clinton is determined not to do that. And the article goes on to discuss both the problems that have existed in the last 8 years and to speak very specifically about where Clinton disagreed with the administration, to which I made some allusion in my opening remarks, and what she wants to do. And I think if you're serious about pursuing the issue and take a look at this and see the range of people whom each of us knows to have been major advisors on Israel and on the Middle East, from Wendy Sherman to Dennis Ross, that you will see, guys, there are differences of opinion on this. She has a set of relationships and a commitment to the future of Israel, which I've heard from her over 30 years, and which I've not heard particularly often from Trump. I said at the beginning, there's not been much discussion of policy and positions in any of this campaign, but I think that that's been very, very true in this regard.
Okay, so let me mention a few things. And the issue is not Mr. Trump's friends, 99% of whom are wonderful, not that I know all his friends, and 1% I don't even know who they are, who statistically might not be so wonderful. That's not the issue. The issue is, who are Hillary's friends? Hillary's friends are enemies of America, enemies of Israel, enemies of Western civilization. She's a disciple of Saul Alinsky, longtime communist from the 30s, 40s. She's friendly with George Soros, who hates Israel, hates America, hates Western civilization. She's friendly with Russia, with whom she authorized Russia to buy 20% of our uranium. That's brilliant. And she's complicit with all of the 4 worldwide terror organizations. Complicit. Iran is developing nukes right now and ICBMs with our name on them, America, USA on them, because she was behind an Iranian deal which allowed them to have nukes, to allow a professional terror organization to have nukes. Number 2, she's complicit with ISIS, not that she created ISIS, but by leaving Iraq prematurely, it created a vacuum that ISIS filled. Number 3, she's complicit with the Muslim Brotherhood. She overthrew Mubarak, she overthrew Gaddafi with the express desire to have the Muslim Brotherhood sweep in and enslave the normal Muslims in Egypt and in Libya. I had the pleasure of meeting President el-Sisi. I went over with a delegation earlier this year, and he said to us, he said, we almost lost our country. The Muslim Brotherhood criminal organization had taken over. I had to take over, use the military to take over to save our country. We saved our country. Saved it from Hillary and Obama. And she's complicit with the Wahhabis, the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, who provided financing to her foundation in return for special favors. And let me mention one last point relative to Jerusalem. Hillary thinks that Israel has no right to Jerusalem, either Western or Eastern Jerusalem. The official policy of the State Department when she was Secretary of State is that Jerusalem should be an international city. Israel has no rights to it. Israel's been there for 3,000 years. Americans have been Washington for 400 years, and she has the gall or chutzpah to tell the Jews where they're supposed to live. That's insulting and anti-Semitic.
I'm going to allow just one more. So I'm looking at the clock. It's 8:17. We're going to finish this evening no later than 8:30. I have 2 more questions to ask. I'm going to just, however, allow the speakers 2 more minutes just to debate back and forth the foreign policy question. I know Ruth wants to respond about Jerusalem, and I want you each to say words or another word, for those who've already spoken about it, about the Iran deal. I know the Iran deal is something which many people in the Jewish community are concerned about. What should be done now, not what should have been done, but what ought now be done about that. I'm going to allow Ruth to go first, and then to Ken to respond, and then we'll move on to the final 2 questions.
Okay, and again, I'm going to, in this instance, read to you from the Clinton campaign statements. I want to say that I would find it easier to debate Ken again, A, if he was speaking for what Donald Trump says and believes, which he does very rarely, but B, if some of his characterizations didn't sort of bubble over to the list of people that he just read who are enemies of Western civilization, from Saul Alinsky to George Soros, just strikes me as like being quite outside of the pale of what usually passes for reasonable discussion and debate. With regard to Iran, Hillary's position is to hold Iran accountable and to counter its destabilizing actions in the region. Clinton believes that Iran should never be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. We must enforce the nuclear deal vigorously with a distrust and verify approach. I've heard your response to this. But she goes on to say that the nuclear deal alone is not enough, which is why Clinton has a comprehensive plan to address Iran's support for terrorism and its destabilizing actions in the region. In particular, she will work closely with Israel's leaders early on to strengthen that alliance and to ensure that Israel always has the capacity to defend itself. Witness the recent foreign aid agreement between the U.S. and Israel. She will expand our military presence in the Persian Gulf and act to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, build a coalition to counter Iran's proxies, stand against Iran's abuses at home, and strengthen efforts to generate stability and counter extremism by renewing diplomacy to solve the destructive regional conflicts that Iran fuels. I haven't heard a single statement like any one of those short phrases from Donald Trump, or in fact from most of his speakers. It's clear to me some of what Ken Abramowitz would do, and I appreciate that, but I don't know you to be the senior foreign policy advisor, and it doesn't matter because I don't see him listening to the people who advise him.
Okay, so let me mention a few things about the Iran deal, which Iran never signed. And we handed over $100 billion to a criminal organization, an illegal government that has no right to exist. They're basically a terror organization that took over a country and pretends to be a normal government. America never negotiates with terrorists. Why did we negotiate with these terrorists? And hand them money and rights to have nukes in 10 to 15 years. So this is a mess that the next president is going to be stuck with. And it was immoral and unethical for the Democratic Party to stick the country with this type of a mess. So the question is, how do we get out of this mess? Well, number one, we have to step up the sanctions. Well, the sanctions were working. They were in like second gear. We should have taken them to third gear and fourth gear. We should have bankrupted Iran. That was the answer. And we were on our way. And President Obama and Hillary decided not to bankrupt Iran, but to pay them money to be nice. How many times do you have to pay enemies to be nice? Neville Chamberlain tried that, and it cost 60 million people their lives. And what if I told you Neville Chamberlain also gave Germany not just Europe, yeah, it can also have 150 billion and then dollars. You'd say, hello, how could he do that? Okay, so we have to take the sanctions up. We have to bankrupt Iran. We almost bankrupted them. We have to go back to bankrupting Iran. Number two, I would institute the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, no one remembers the Monroe Doctrine. And we'll walk on the street, interview 10 people and say, what's the Monroe Doctrine? Okay, the Monroe Doctrine was 200 years ago, and it said that we will protect the South, Latin America, from our enemies. Not necessarily because we care about Latin America, but it's like a buffer state, and we have to protect ourselves in the South from our enemies. Iran is invading Latin America with 40 to 50,000 agents. I want all of them out, like right now. And I would say to the Latin American countries, any of you who harbor Iranian terrorists, you have to make a decision. It's either the American market or the Iranian market. You can decide. We'll give you 2 days to think about it. But if those Iranians are still there in 2 days, you can forget about shipping anything to America.
Okay, thank you. And just to help move towards the end, one closing question, but this is the last sort of question that's somewhat different for both sides. A number of questions to each of you. One, I'm just going to hold up the question. The person writing it is clearly a doctor of some kind. I can't read the the writing, but there's questions about the appropriateness or the fitness for office of both candidates. I agree with all the Republican issues, but I strongly feel that Mr. Trump is the wrong person. How can I vote for a person that makes fun of women and handicapped, who feels it's okay to sexually attack women because he's a celebrity, who constantly changes his positions and refuses advice from anyone on any issue? Similarly, how can you justify supporting a candidate who denigrates women and who demonstrates a lack of respect for people of a specific religion? And equally to you, Ruth, Mr. Messinger, explain the concerns about Hillary. Well, I'm going to change it slightly. Please respond to the concerns about Hillary Clinton's trustworthiness, questions of honesty, questions, and this is in the question I can't quite read, questions of the email service, question of honesty, questions of corruption, of enrichment through the Clinton Foundation, how come the Clintons made so much money upon leaving office. So really questions to the two of you about the ethics, the basic fitness for office of both of the candidates that you are speaking for. Why don't you go first, Ken, and then Ruth?
Okay, so let me address three issues. Hillary, relative to women, to Muslims, and to gays. Hillary hates women. I hate to say it, it's sad to say, but Hillary is a supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood believes that women should be treated roughly like cattle, same rights of cattle. I don't believe that, she does. So she's supporting the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Thank goodness that President el-Sisi saved the country from Hillary. She was so gleeful that she killed Gaddafi. Great. Now there's people getting slaughtered all over the place. And so Hillary she takes money for the foundation from the Gulf states, from Saudi Arabia. She even took money from Iran, which was working on nukes to blow up America. She took that into her foundation. So Hillary hates women. She pretends to like women here, but outside of America, she hates women and she supports organizations and collects money from organizations that think women have the same rights of cattle. Number two, for Muslims, Islam is a political religion. We don't understand that. But I heard a Muslim Brotherhood agent operative speak. He's converted to Christianity. He gives speeches. He said he's an expert on the Quran. After he spoke, I asked him, what percent of Islam is a religion, what percent is a political movement? He said, to make it simple on yourself, think of it as a 20% religion, 80% political movement. So don't confuse Islam as a religion and Islam as a political movement. Islam as a religion is protected in America by the Constitution Bill of Rights. Islam as a political movement is no more protected than communism, paganism, socialism, communism. If you don't believe in the Constitution Bill of Rights and you're subversive to the country, whatever the ism it is, you're not protected by us. And let me mention a final thing. Hillary hates gays. She pretends she likes gays and lesbians. She hates them for the same reason with the women. Within the country, she says that everything's wonderful. And then she takes money from countries that kill gays, hang them, and says nothing about it. So she's two-faced, and she's basically a hypocrite, and she's a fraud. And she would be an embarrassment to the country.
I'm going to ask you, nonetheless, thank you for responding to the question about Hillary. I am going to really ask you, because it is a concern of a lot of people here, to respond to the questions about Donald Trump's, I don't need to remind you of the questions, about concerns of his attitude towards women, to his basic trustworthiness for office. I would like you to address that.
Okay. I'll still go back and say what I said. The issue's not Trump, the issue's Hillary.
No. Okay, so then you
Okay.
said that already. If you decline to answer,
Okay.
then just say so.
Look, I'm not going to tell you that Mr. Trump is perfect. I'm not going to say that, okay? But I know that she's evil. And so this is a classic battle between good and evil. She's evil, and he's close enough to being good.
Okay. We only do have a couple minutes left. Going to ask Ruth to respond, and then there'll be one last closer.
Sure. For those of you who have some of the concerns that I've gathered from your response on some of these questions, you may indeed feel that you're facing a difficult choice, and I respect that. But I don't think it's a choice that my partner up here should be making fun of in the way in which he is. So I want to first respond on the questions about Hillary. Hillary has said that her decision to use a separate email server was wrong. In public life, guys, in public life, no, that's the FBI and said that is not the case, but I believe that I'm still representing Hillary and that you were just in the audience. So you've had a good deal to say. Let me just try to respond to the question. There aren't very many people in public life, certainly not Donald Trump, but there aren't very many people in public life over 10, 20, 30, 40 years who are strong enough to say they were wrong on an issue. I'm not going to tell you the very few times that I did it, but I respect the fact that Hillary has said that. That's point one. Two, I find that the statements that require a response, Ken is free either to defend the candidate on whose behalf he's speaking or to attack the other candidate. That's a prerogative of debaters in a situation like this. The statements that were made about Hillary just now by Ken are in every single regard patently untrue, and I'm actually in a position to know a great deal of this personally. I have worked with the Clinton Foundation as they've cut the number of cases of HIV/AIDS around the world in half. I have worked with Hillary Clinton in support of the rights of girls and women in Muslim states, in other states around the country, in Africa. I could give you a very long list. It's my work, and I've done it with her. I've done it with her on behalf of the rights of LGBT persons. To say that somebody who has built a record of doing this work and speaking up on these issues is a fraud and a liar and evil, for me, maybe not for some of you, but for me goes well beyond the legitimacy of public debate and discourse, and I could dispute you on it case by case and item by item. So that's on Hillary. And then on Trump, I think I have said it. Somebody who has stood there on television as we have watched him and said the things that he said the day before, that not only Hillary Clinton, but any one of 3 or 4 moderators have said to him, you said this, and he says, no, I didn't. And we are enough in an age of fact-checking, so at least on some of these shows, there's then a quote of his saying this. This is somebody who feels that the truth is what he believes it is at any given moment on any given day. I suspect, and you made an allusion to this earlier on, that it may have been a style that dealt with him well in business. But it is not, for me, somebody that I want to see leading this country or leading the free world. He lies when it's to his advantage. He changes position on issues because he doesn't have any of the depth that Hillary has, whether we agree with her on every point or not. He does not have the character or the temperament, or I am going to say, the value system that would allow him to run America and run the free world. And so he's...
Okay, well, you know the...
you've managed to answer every single point. Maybe the next time I debate, you would like to take Ken's job because you've had a lot to say.
Well, we've done astonishingly well, and as bedtime for all of us approaches, I know we're getting this a little bit testy. The last question, and really is a catch-all and just a summation question for each of you, 2 minutes. What concerns you most about a Trump presidency? For Ruth, what concerns you most about a Clinton presidency? For Ken, 2 minutes each, and then Shalom
on a Hillary.
Yes. What concerns you most about no? Well, you can.
Okay.
I think I prefer you to answer the question. What concerns you most about a Trump presidency, and then what concerns you most about a Clinton presidency?
Okay. So I think actually I'm going to try to do both because I think on the Trump presidency, I've actually said more about that than I thought I would in some responses to some of what Ken has said. I do not think that this is a reliable, informed, or trustworthy man. I think his attitude, an expressed attitude toward the appeal of deporting over 11 million Muslims, his attack on, I've heard him say it, that's what he says on television, but I've heard him say it. His attack on women, not just his sexual assault attacks, but endless comments about women in every regard, from the, whatever they are, the Miss Americas to women in his life, are really scary and offensive to me in a country in which women still don't have full equal rights on a great many fronts. So that's what tremendously concerns me about the dangers of a Trump presidency. And on the Hillary presidency, I'm going to pick up on something that you asked about earlier, and that is, regardless of who wins on November 8th, we as a country have a great deal to do to decide on November 9th and moving forward whether we want to return to a time as difficult, a set of times as difficult as they were when the leading parties tried to find common cause on issue after issue, domestic and international. That has not been the mindset of this Congress in the last 4, 5, 6 years. And I think whoever wins as president is going to have a great deal of trouble and a serious challenge that we can all help with in restoring what I consider to be one of the strengths of democracy, and that is negotiation on the issues.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me just spend 2 minutes on what's wrong if Hillary becomes president. So let me go back to what I said in the very beginning. Grow the economy, protect the culture, protect us physically. Let's look at Hillary from these 3 points of view. Grow the economy. She believes in higher taxes. Higher taxes slows the economy because the government is a bad investor. We don't want the government to have more money. The government already has too much money. So the economy for the last 8 years has grown 1%. It should have grown 3 or 4%. When Mr. Trump becomes Mr. Trump, it'll grow 3 or 4% instead of 1%. That's a big deal because it gives the country the resources to do all the other things that it wants to do. Number 2, relative to the culture, Hillary doesn't believe in the Constitution Bill of Rights. So let's look at in particular, 3 elements of the Bill of Rights. Number 1, freedom of speech. Hillary doesn't believe in freedom of speech. She believes in political correctness. She also believes in blasphemy laws, that we can't criticize political Islam when they threaten to kill us. I think we can criticize. So she doesn't believe in freedom of speech. She doesn't believe in the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. And number 10, she doesn't believe in states' rights. She thinks all decisions should be made by Washington. That's a false narrative. And finally, relative to physical protection, she doesn't believe in a strong military. Our military can't protect the country anymore. We're becoming like Europe. Europe can't protect themselves. Now America can't protect itself. We have 2 competitors, Russia and China, and we have 4 what I call enemies, political Islam entities. She doesn't want to protect our borders. By the way, Israel has a fence all around its borders. It protects it pretty well. And number 3, inside the U.S., according to the Investigative Project of Terrorism, there's 160 terror cells openly operating right now in the U.S., and the FBI is doing nothing to close them down, and Hillary hasn't called for anyone to close them down, and this is a disaster waiting to happen. So I come back to where I started. She gets an F, an F, and an F, and that's why she's not qualified to be president.
Okay, thank you very much to everybody who attended. Again, many thanks to Dr. Belsky. Really, thank you for everybody for coming, and thank you for engaging with the issues, and thank you for civility. I'm just going to make a closing remark, first of all, just to reiterate that there is no endorsement of either candidate by Lincoln Square Synagogue or by, and that's very, very clear. 2 weeks today in the Shul 11 a.m. we have a Hachnasat Sefer Torah, which will be a beautiful and joyous and unifying occasion. And let me just finish by the prayer that I think all of us, every Jew and every American should have for the next couple of weeks. Aseh shalom b'mromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'yakol Yisrael. Imru amen. Thank you very much.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.